For over 100 years, from 1810 to 1937, there was believed to be an island called Sannikov Land north of the New Siberian Islands, way up here in the Arctic Circle. Let's zoom out a little bit to see where we even are. So we are in a very remote part of Siberia in Russia, and this was a place that was unexplored for a long time. But in the late 1700s and early 1800s, these islands right here, the Anjou Islands, part of the New Siberian group, were being explored and mapped out. As one of the first explorers who was looking through these islands, Sannikov was looking at Kotelny Island, this one right here, and he was mapping out the region. In around 1810, he was standing at the very northern tip of this island, looking outwards to the northwest, and he saw an island that was about 30 to 50 miles away, way up here, but he was unable to reach it as he had pretty much gone to the brink of his expedition at this point. For over 100 years after this, multiple explorers had tried to find this island, some even dying while doing it. It took until much later when powerful USSR ships could come up here and finally debunk the island years later. So today we're going to look at the history of so-called Sannikov Land, what it took to find it, the expeditions that came up to it, and the theories about what ended up happening to it. Let's explore. First of all, how do we even know that people thought Sannikov Island existed? Well, let's look at old maps from the time. This one's from 1896 from the US Department of Navy. And if you come to that exact area that we were talking about earlier, you can see they have a dashed line and it simply says Sannikov Land. They also put two red dots where this guy named Anjou was in 1822. Let's look at some more maps. This map is from 1897, about 1 year later. And you can come to that same spot right over Котельный Island here, and you can see Sannikov Land. Also, it's kind of undefined as well. Here's an atlas of the world from 1919. You come to that same exact area. It's very hard to see, but they do mention Sannikov Land way up here in that same exact spot. And one last map I found here, this is the one that you can see on the Wikipedia page for Sannikov Land. It's from 1922, so around that same time, and they do show it, but it's also undefined, as well as Bennett Island over here, part of the DeLong Islands that we've looked at in a video before. The interesting thing is I could only find mentions of the island on maps after around 1890. From maps from 1810 to 1890, there is almost no mention of anything up here at all, despite it being known about for that time. And honestly, there wasn't even too many newspaper articles about Sannikov Land until the early 1900s. This was by far the earliest newspaper article I could find about Sannikov Land. It's from New Brunswick, Canada in 1882, March 27th. And the title of the article is Results of the Jeanette's Cruise. They talk about Bennett Island in here, and then they also talk about a possible Sannikov Land. They say in 1810, the Russian surveyors Hedenschtrom and Sannikov believed that from the crest of New Siberia, they had caught a glimpse of bluish mountains lying to the north and east. In 1811, Sannikov was once again confident that he had described high lands to the northeast while he was exploring Vladimir Island. And just for your reference, that's this one over here to the right of Котельный Island. Lieutenant Anjou renewed in 1823 the attempt to penetrate by sledges to the lands which were supposed to exist in that quarter. They also mentioned in this newspaper article that Lieutenant Anjou also tried in 1823 to get to this land but was unsuccessful. I found another source that describes Sannikov coming up to these New Siberian islands around the early 1800s, and then also having an expedition here in 1810. And then again in the 1820s, these islands were visited by the Yana expedition, headed by Anjou, the same guy, and by another expedition by Wrangel, who Wrangel Island is named after. They show a very, very old map about these newly discovered Siberian islands in here, but there is no mention of Sannikov Land as we know it today. It's a very primitive map, but it's not showing it anywhere here. And interestingly, in those two very old sources, there's no mention of a land up here to the north and very slightly northwest of Котельный Island. That's kind of bizarre. We can't find any necessarily primary sources about it right now. So let's keep looking at what other newspaper articles from the late 1800s or early 1900s had to say about the history. Primary sources about Sannikov's original expedition are few and far between. This is definitely not a primary source, but it's an old blog post about Sannikov and seems pretty detailed, although there's no sources in this article itself. And they mention pretty briefly that while he was on Котельный Island, Sannikov found high stone mountains in the northwest, about 70 versts away. After this point, Sannikov told Gedenschtrom about this, and then he marked it on the map, the land seen by Sannikov. Now that I'm looking back at this picture here, I actually kind of see what they're saying. They said they painted mountains where they described the land known as Sannikov. And if you look way up here in the north, it's very ineligible. It does look like they painted mountains up here, which is maybe where he was describing it to be. They mentioned at the end that Sannikov found multiple unexplored lands, and it took a long time for these to be disproven or proven right. From what I can tell, Sannikov Land remained kind of an urban legend, as from maps from 1810 to around 1890 didn't really show Sannikov Land on them. I mean, the maps I showed you earlier were from 1890 and beyond. This is one from 1867, and they show in pretty good detail these New Siberian islands up here. But then where Sannikov Land is supposed to be, they interestingly have nothing up here at all. Although one side note that I won't get into is they show a couple maps over here that are not on today's maps either. The next newspaper article I could find about all of this was from the Oamaru Mail from December 30th, 1896. And this is a story from Mr. Nansen. It's a very long newspaper article, so I won't go through the whole thing. He does mention trying to find Sannikov Land. He said, "I should have liked to go eastwards along the edge of the ice for the purpose of examining, if possible, the mysterious Sannikov Land, and thence go in the direction of Bennett Island," which is the one that's northeast of the New Siberian Islands. There was a great deal of ice in this direction, and progress would consequently be doubtful. After this, he describes the rest of his journey, but nothing about Sannikov Land. Side note, this is who Nansen is, the one who wrote that 1896 newspaper article, and he just looks like a badass. I mean, look at him. There's also an insane story about him going up to Franz Josef Land and getting rescued from there, but I won't get into that in this video. This newspaper article from the Brooklyn Eagle in 1936 describes a little more about the history that we've missed out on. So we already talked about how in 1810 Sannikov first found the island. Well, in 1886, this is when things started to heat up and Sannikov started to be put on maps. This geologist, Eduard Toll, did an expedition to Kotelny Island, and in the same approximate location as Sannikov Land, he saw 4 mountain peaks joined by tableland in that proximate location. 14 years later, Eduard von Toll went up here on a Russian polar expedition, the main goal of finding Sannikov Land. Little did he know this would be the last time he was ever seen. I'll link this down in the description because it's a really good source for the entire Russian polar expedition, but they describe the history. Back in 1886, like we just talked about, he was around that area, and he reports, "We clearly saw on a northeasterly bearing the outlines of 4 tabular mountains which merged together to the east into a lowland," just like that newspaper article said. He was convinced that he was seeing Sannikov Land, and he estimated it to be around 150 to 200 kilometers away. This article is really good because it also describes the early history as well, which we've talked about, when Yakov Sannikov found the island back in 1811, and then Anjou also came here in the 1820s. In 1887, he went back and reported to the Academy of Sciences that basically said, "We need to go up and find this land as we are in a better position than any other nation to do it." And I think this is probably why Sannikov Land started appearing on maps after 1890 instead of before, as there was a lot of hype building up about this island around this time. So in 1899, plans started coming together to actually go up and try to find Sannikov Island once and for all. They also wanted to do other science on this mission, but the main goal was to find Sannikov Land. Here's the boat they took up there, the Zarya. They spent a lot of 1901 looking for Sannikov Land, but they couldn't find anything conclusive, and they spent the winter at this place. Once the ship couldn't move any more north, Toll and a couple of his companions had a plan. They wanted to go all the way up to Bennett Island, which they knew about, way up here, pretty mountainous island, and once they got here, explore around for Sannikov Land. The Zarya ship was supposed to come up here to Bennett Island eventually to replace their supplies, but they weren't sure if it would ever make it. What Toll and his crew did was they set up a base camp, they hunted for a lot of bears, walruses, and reindeer, and eventually all of the reindeer left the island. They started running low on food, and the Zarya ship never made it to them. They started to grow worried, so they ended up eventually heading south to get the heck out of Bennett Island, as it was clear that the Zarya ship was not going to make it. They left a note behind saying they were healthy, they had enough food for about 3 weeks. After this point, they were never seen or heard from again. It was assumed at some point on this journey from Bennett Island down south that the men ran out of food or they got killed at some point. Sadly, they never found any evidence of Sannikov Land either, the one thing that they were trying to do while up here. Now, that 1902 Russian polar expedition was not going to be the end of people searching for Sannikov Land. In 1926, there was a plan to fly around the island to see if they could find it, but I couldn't find any more information about this. The hype kept growing about this place. In 1927, Vladimir Obruchev wrote a science fiction novel called Sannikov Land, describing it as a large island that had a huge volcano in it and was a lot warmer than the surrounding area, with a lot of people living up there as well. 1936 is almost the end of the story for Sannikov Land, as there was finally once and for all an expedition that would reach that area and prove or disprove Sannikov Island's existence. Now, the expedition was slated for 1937. However, the first newspaper article I could see that described that Sannikov Island truly wasn't there was 1940. This is because the 3 ships that went up to this area were actually imprisoned in ice for a couple years. A lot of the crew members were rescued pretty quickly. However, one of the ships, the Sedov, was stuck in ice permanently. In this article, they described that they went straight through the area, yet there was no signs of Sannikov Land at all. So that's the whole story, right? No. Well, what exactly happened to Sannikov Land? I mean, a few other people did notice seeing an island up here around that time, so what was the real cause of what they were seeing? One theory from this newspaper article, 1952, describes a land-fast ice theory. Basically that ice islands are breaking off of the poles, and they do appear to look very similar to what actual islands look like. And when you see them from far away, you would just think they're another land island. They describe a similar appearance to Sannikov Land years ago. This theory is a little more wild, but it may have some merit. This is an article from 1987. Keep in mind this was in the middle of the Cold War, and this newspaper article is written in the United States, so clearly has bias. They say that the mystery of Sannikov Land may have been solved when there was a massive plume of vapor rising above Bennett Island near Sannikov Land, and its cloud could have been mistaken for a landmass. It describes that sometimes these fumes get stuck in the ice over a long time and then they release looking like an island. That also is a plausible theory, yet it doesn't explain how multiple different people did report seeing the island, so I think that one's a little less likely. There have been other theories as well that maybe the island was there and slowly got washed away, or there was land on top of ice that slowly sunk down into the ocean. So it actually did exist around the 1800s, but then when people came back to rediscover it, it was no longer there. You can see these shoals all the time. It's not the same thing as what Sannikov was described as, but this is a little sandbar that a lot of people in my comments have mentioned. They wonder what this thing even is, but these things are moving all the time, so it's possible Sannikov Land could have been something similar to this. And this is the last little bit of history, but there was actually a movie in 1973 based on Sannikov Island, actually based on that novel from the 1920s. And it's a science fiction movie. It's all in Russian, but it seems like a pretty interesting movie, and it definitely has that 1970s look to it. Hope you enjoyed this video about Sannikov Land and learning about another phantom island up there in the Russian Arctic. It was interesting learning about this place and researching it. I think that's one of the most fun parts about making these videos, is just looking up old sources and trying to piece together things from the help of old newspaper articles and random forum posts that people have made. Anyways, thanks for watching, and let me know what islands I should cover next.